Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Breaking Through session today. My name is Marian Amoa, and I'm the author of Breaking Through the Immigrant Handbook for Thriving in the American Workplace. I always have a chuckle when I say that because this book goes beyond being a guide for immigrants. It shares universal principles and powerful stories, strategies designed to help anyone excel in their professional journey and in life. Well, welcome to our mental health series. In our last session, which we called part one, what is mental health, we had Dr. Rosalind Caesar join us, and she really defined what mental health is. We looked at the World Health Organization definition of what mental health is and how mental health affects us in the workplace and also at home and in our relationships, right? Today, Dr. Caesar has graciously agreed to join us again, and she's going to share with us why your mental health is more important than you think, and she'll provide us with 2 tips on how to manage our mental health. So, Dr. Caesar, I call her Rosalind sometimes, welcome once again. I'm so glad and excited to have you here with us. And so today, I would want you to once again introduce yourself, quick introduction, a fun fact for those who were not able to watch part one. And again, if you haven't watched part one, feel free to go to our YouTube channel, Breaking Through Immigrant Voices, and you would catch the part one of the first series. And so, Dr. Caesar, welcome. Introduce yourself, give us a fun fact, and we'll get into our discussion for the day.
Okay, thank you very much, Marian, for having me back. My name is Rosalind Caesar again. I am a licensed clinical counselor and a board-approved clinical supervisor in the state of Maryland, and I'm also a national certified counselor. I have a master's degree in human services counseling and a doctorate in human services. I have a private practice at home care counseling where I work with children, teens, adults, and then with families.
Fun fact.
Fun fact about myself. I like being silly.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I like to laugh, so I enjoy being silly.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Some people, yes.
Yeah, that is being your
Some,
authentic self, as they say.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Caesar, today I would like for you to give us 2 reasons why our mental health is so important, why it's more important than we think ourselves. So, reason number one.
Okay. So when we think about our health, we typically think of our physical health. What's aching, what is not aching. And we don't put as much premium on our mental health. But the truth is that we are only as good as our mental health. Because if you think about it, we can actually do without some body parts. For example, somebody can be a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. Somebody can even be born without all their limbs, and they can live a full life. And Nick Vujicic is an example. He was born without limbs, but he's a motivational speaker. He is a celebrity. He is married. He has children. On the flip side, if somebody has a mental health problem, they are not going to be able to function well. Okay, so when we think about our mental health and our physical health, we tend to prioritize physical health, but the truth is that we need to prioritize our mental health because we can have all our physical faculties, but if we are not able to use our mental faculties well, we will not be able to, in a certain sense, we'll not be able to make use of our physical abilities. Okay, so why is it therefore important to prioritize our mental health? Because first of all, it impacts our ability to function and to be productive. If we remember, when we talked about the definition of mental health, according to WHO, it said a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to contribute to their community. So our mental health is what allows us to function and to be productive. So without mental health, we cannot function, we will not be productive. And to give examples or to bring it down to the everyday level, we talked about mental illness affecting the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. So if we break it down, let's take thinking. If I cannot think straight, it could affect an area of my life, like my ability to focus. Focus has to do with my ability to pay attention to information. That's going to affect whether I can retain the information, understand it, whether I can store it in memory so that I can retrieve it when I need it in the future. If I'm a student and I cannot focus, right there I have a problem because I'm not going to do well in school. If I'm not thinking straight, it's going to affect my ability to reason logically. So it's going to affect my ability to solve problems. And so we see that if I'm not functioning well mentally, it's going to show up in the way I live. If we take behavior, if my behavior is a problem, it's going to affect my relationships because people are going to have a problem with how I behave, and that's going to create an issue. Or separate from my relationships, it can create a problem for me directly. So if we take a disorder, a mental illness like bipolar disorder, one aspect of bipolar disorder is a person can be manic, where they are doing everything in excess of what is normal. A person who is manic, who is having a manic episode, can end up overspending, shopping too much, and go into debt because in that moment they were not well mentally. So that's another example of why it is important to have our mental health in place, because without it, our functioning and our productivity is affected. If I have spent all my money on shoes because I was having a manic episode, I'm not going to have money left to pay my rent, to take care of my children, to take care of my other financial obligations, and that's going to have repercussions and snowball into other kinds of problems. If we think about how we feel, if I am not feeling, I'm trying to think of if there's a problem with how I feel, so that the way I feel is not consistent with what my culture or the world in general considers as normal, it's going to create a problem because it means I'm going to respond in a way that is in excess or is less than is expected. So, for example, if I am feeling depressed, if I am experiencing depression, it means that I am not going to be as active as it will be expected of me. That can have implications for whether I will keep or I will lose my job. Because if I can't get up and get my job done, it's going to be a problem for my employer. If I have anxiety and I tend to think of benign situations as threatening to me, I'm going to overreact because I'm going to think people are attacking me and I'm going to respond to that perceived attack. So you will see that our ability to function and to be productive is very closely tied with our mental health. So that is one area where our mental health impacts us. And so it is important for us to take care of it. The other area is on our physical health, because there is a body-mind connection. So it is not like I am physically well and I am mentally unwell, so I will continue to be physically well. If I am mentally unwell, eventually it's going to affect me physically. And if I'm physically unwell, eventually it's going to affect me mentally. And that is, personally, as a therapist, I like to tell people part of the reason why anxiety and depression are the two commonest disorders, mental disorders, is because if I have any kind of problem for long enough, so let's say my foot hurts all the time, or I have chronic back pain, or the doctor told me that maybe I have cancer. If it is something that persists long enough, I'm going to start feeling anxious. And if I think that I'm not going to get out of that state, I am going to get depressed. And so we find that what happens to us physically ends up affecting us mentally, and what happens to us mentally ends up affecting us physically. So when it comes to something like anxiety, one of the treatments for anxiety is basically to teach your body how to relax, because when we feel anxious, it arouses our physical body. It causes changes within our body. If we can get our body not to respond that way when we perceive a situation as threatening, we will not experience anxiety. So if I can control my body, I can actually control my mind. If I can control my mind, I can control my body. So our mental health has impact on our physical body. So for instance, again, going back to anxiety, because anxiety is related to stress hormone production. If a person experiences anxiety consistently for long periods at high levels, over time, it means they are producing a lot of stress hormones. It can affect their heart. We are talking high blood pressure, cardiac, things like that. It can affect their muscles because when we are in the stress mode, our muscles are tense. So fatigue is something we can start to experience where the person is chronically fatigued and then they always feel tired. That can happen. Our gut system is affected by the our stress hormones. So if I am under stress for a long time, so people, I think that people tend to joke that if you're so anxious all the time, you develop an ulcer because a stomach ulcer. Yes, it is because of these stress hormones. So we realize that what's going on with us mentally affects us physically. If we take another disorder, for example, depression, somebody who has depression can either overeat or undereat. If you undereat, you're going to get malnourished. If you overeat, you're going to gain excess weight.
Yeah.
Okay, so then right there, your physical health is affected. If it is severe enough such that you are not moving, you are not getting out of bed, you are not doing anything, it's affecting your ability to exercise. It's affecting how your muscle strength and how you're working. So that's another way. If we take a disorder like a schizophrenia spectrum disorder, and in schizophrenia in particular, and we're talking about the negative behaviors. If a person is not bathing because they are not well, and coming from a third world country, we probably have experiences of the people we talk about and we describe them as a madman. He's out in the street, he is not bathing, he is coated in grime, he is eating food that is not healthy. Those are all avenues for infection. Those are all things that can affect their physical health. If they are not eating, again, we're talking about malnourishment. So we see how these disorders can segue into physical disorders. And then the last example I will give again is mania in bipolar disorder. One of the characteristics or one of the signs that go with it is risky behaviors. So that some people, when they are manic, engage in become promiscuous. So they are engaging in sexual activity, sometimes with strangers, exposing themselves to sexually transmitted infections and things like that. So we see how in these ways our physical activity is affected by our mental health. So why is it important to maintain our mental health? Because it impacts our ability to function and to be productive, and it also impacts our physical health.
So impacts our ability to function and to be productive, and impacts our physical health.
Yes.
And really, the reason why I wanted us to have this conversation was the session I had with you, but I had a session with Nana Bafo Ewa, who the title is The Will to Walk Again. He had a life-altering accident, and he talked about how he was suicidal and depression and all that. And he gave hope that, he, in his own words, first of all, sitting in a wheelchair was not part of the equation when he was coming to America. And two, being in a wheelchair now is not a death sentence. There's a way out, right? And he talked about the things when his mindset began to shift, he was able to rise up and do so many and achieve a lot. And I wanted us to have this conversation with you because mental health is not something we want to talk about. It's so much stigmatized. But I think that in the conversations we are having today and the one we had previously, it's so important to deal with it if you are having high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, because ultimately it affects the way you function and your productivity and how you function in society, in community.
Exactly.
And you've also been able to show us the relationship between that and your physical health, mind, body. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing this with us. Now, give us some tips. If I'm having high levels of anxiety, in my book, I talk about immigrants, or even if you're not an immigrant, you've moved from one place to the other, you've lost social capital, you've maybe lost other things, right? There's that loss, there's that fear. Are you going to do well? Or even changing jobs, or it could even be a stressful situation at job. How can you give us one or two tips on how to manage our mental health? Let me say that, so that we can thrive.
Okay, so to go back to the example that you gave, and I think it kind of buttresses my point that our mental health is really what determines who we are, not our physical health. Because, like you said, after his accident, it was really difficult for him to function because mentally he was not doing well. But once he had a mental shift, his physical condition didn't change per se, but he was in a totally different place. And that is what we need to understand, that we are our mental health, not our physical health. So that's what we should be focusing on. Okay. So how do we manage our mental health? There's two ways to look at it. We can look at it as preventative action and then as treatment action. Treatment is where there is a problem we have identified, or something is going on. I have been diagnosed with some type of mental disorder. Or it doesn't meet criteria for a disorder, but it is creating problems. Treatment can take the form of therapy or counseling, or it can take the form of medication management. So medication is you go see a psychiatrist, they prescribe you medication, it helps you to feel better. And the two can go together, or they can be separate. Typically, therapy can go alone. Medication is always recommended with therapy. And as I explained, it will become clear. In therapy, what we are doing is you are learning a different way of being. Like you are learning how to change your lifestyle so that you can function at your best. So, for instance, if somebody has a schizophrenia spectrum disorder, they are prone to hallucinations. I always say that as a therapist. So one of my favorite films is A Beautiful Mind, which is about Dr. John Nash, the Nobel Prize winner. And there's a part in the movie where when the Nobel Prize award guy comes to talk to him, to tell him that he won the award, the guy comes, says hi to him. He starts talking to a person. Then he turns to one of his students and he says, is there a person standing here? And the student says, yes, there's a person standing there. Then he turns back to the Nobel Prize person and says, oh, I just wanted to be sure, because sometimes I've forgotten how he phrased it, but basically he was implying that sometimes I have hallucinations. And so I am checking. So that is a lifestyle adaptation. He has developed a mechanism to help him so that he can counter concerns about hallucinations. So in therapy, we can learn different ways of being so that we can function at our best, irrespective of our diagnosis. Now, the relationship between medication and therapy, I explain this way. If you think about tea, now when you take tea that is hot water boiling out of the kettle, you can't drink it. It's too hot. You need to let it sit for a little bit to come to a temperature that's tolerable to you. Medication is for when a person's condition is at the boiling out of the tea kettle level. At that point, the person is in so much distress. The disorder is so severe that you can't teach them anything in therapy. They can't learn. So they get on medication, and medication helps them to calm down. And then once it has come to the sippable temperature, then therapy can teach individuals the skills they need so that they can prevent themselves from going to that level, and they can prevent some of the problems that may be concomitant with their disorder. The mistake we tend to make is that once somebody gets on medication, then they think they're fine and they don't do anything else. So they don't learn the skills that kind of lift them up and make it harder for the disorder to control their lives. So it is really important that to maintain our mental health, if we are at the point where it is creating serious problems for us, we have a diagnosis, we need to be in therapy or we need to be on medication. We should not ignore those things. So that is on the treatment point. On the preventative side is looking at lifestyle changes.
Okay.
Yes, which again, it is in a certain sense, it's part of treatment because I talked about going to therapy to learn it. But generally, if I don't have a diagnosis, I am fine, but I want to maintain my mental health. Just two things it will help us: lifestyle changes for sleep and for diet. Sometimes we talk about sleep, like I've heard people talk about sleeping and it's like, oh, if you spend 8 hours a day sleeping, you've slept away a third of your life. And it sounds like it's a terrible thing. You should be up 24 hours being productive. The truth is that sleep is such an important part of the body's recovery and the brain's recovery that we need our sleep. A sleep problem can be a disorder in its own right. It can be the sign of another disorder. Like if you're very anxious, you are not going to be able to sleep. Or a sleep problem can contribute to and exacerbate a disorder that's already present. So, for instance, if you are working a lot and you are not sleeping, it can cause problems for you in your functioning, in your cognitive functioning. So, in the area of things like attention, in learning, in your memory, lack of sleep affects all these areas. And these are all areas that we consider as mental health. Lack of sleep affects your ability to regulate your emotions and to handle stress. Yes, because if you're sleepy or you're exhausted from not sleeping, you don't have the bandwidth to deal with anything else. And decreased positive emotions. Positive emotions, things like excited, happy, energetic. You don't have those things when you're sleep deprived. And those are the things that help us to counter stress, to counter the negative emotions. So this just getting enough sleep is a big part of maintaining our mental health. Will we always need 8 hours of sleep? No. Our sleep patterns may change as our life changes. It is important that we are intentional to adjust our lifestyles so that we get the level of sleep we need. And to give us a sense of how important sleep deprivation is. Now, sleep deprivation can be equated to alcohol intoxication.
Wow.
So, yes. So there are some of us who may be walking around drunk, quote unquote, without actually having drunk any alcohol because the research shows that being awake for 17 hours, according to CDC, being awake for 17 hours is similar to having a blood alcohol level of 0.5%. And if you have 0.5% blood alcohol level, your driving is impaired. Okay. If you're awake for 24 hours, so those who are doing 4 shifts and 6 shifts back to back, 24 hours of not sleeping is like a blood alcohol level of 0.1%. And the legal limit is 0.8. So if you don't sleep for 24 hours, you've exceeded the blood alcohol level for driving. And we don't think about that. And yours truly, has a story about when I was doing my master's, there was a time when I did not sleep for a long time because I had a paper that was due. And I went to the gym and ended up taking somebody's sneakers because my brain did not compute. And fortunately, the person came back, the person saw it, said, oh, those are my shoes. I gave it back to them, did not even think about it. It took me about 10 minutes for my brain to put all the pieces together and to realize that, yes, I took somebody's shoes. Why did I take the shoes? Because they were not my shoes. Like, they looked like my shoes. So when I first saw them, I thought was, oh, those are my shoes. But my shoes were actually newer than those shoes. I had not taken my shoes to the gym at the time because I was taking the children to the pool. But my brain simply was not computing. And that is the effect of sleep deprivation. So for our mental health, it's really important that we get the maximum amount of sleep that our body needs. Okay.
Oh, wow. Time is almost up. But I'm sure
So,
we could even go into the sleep thing. You
yeah,
know,
there's a whole lot more there.
there is
Yes.
a whole lot more there. Where can I even start? But
Okay.
I like the statement, we are our mental health.
Yes.
If you are feeling stressed, if you are feeling depressed, extreme sadness, please seek help. Talk to
Exactly.
someone, confide. No stigma, because we are
Mm.
our mental health. That is so, so key. And if for nothing at all, remember, one little thing you could do is we all, including me, manage our sleep. We can't afford to be walking like zombies because it's going to affect our attention, our learning,
I
our
like that,
memory.
walking like zombies, because that's what it feels like. You're a zombie. You're just going through the motions, but cognitively, you are not present.
And we all want to thrive. We want to do well. That is the purpose of these conversations, to empower us and provide us with tips and tools and resources. This has been, we don't have a lot of time. I can't go into all of the things that we have said, but would you mind rereading the definition of mental health by WHO? I like it, that function, productivity,
Okay.
abilities, community, and then
Okay.
we will end.
Okay. So the WHO definition for mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. It does not mean the absence of mental disorders or disabilities.
Yes. And
Okay.
last time you said having a mental health issue is not a death sentence.
No, it is not.
There are ways to adjust, there are ways to be intentional. Today you said be intentional to make adjustments. I
Yes.
am walking away with, if I can't do anything, at least I can manage my sleep.
You can manage your sleep. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Dr.
You're
Rosalind
welcome.
Caesar, for sharing your wisdom with us today. Please, if you once you watch this, please put in your comments what stood out for you. What are you going to commit to do differently starting today? Remember, thriving is possible. You can do something about it, and you deserve to thrive. And so, if this conversation spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend or a colleague or a family member who needs to hear this. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.